Why does gaming need emulation? What can emulators do for games, past, present, and future? Well, I'll tell you why. Video games have evolved over the years, and gamers are voracious. They want bigger, longer games, better gameplay, better graphics, better everything. But wouldn't it be nice to go back every now and then? Everyone's got that one favorite video game that they want to go back and play again, no matter how old and outdated it is, and yet they can't play it on their modern systems. Why is that? There's no backwards compatibility, or there's no emulation, or they just didn't make a remake, or a re-release, or a remaster, or whatever. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I've bought and I've sold consoles throughout the years, and then occasionally I'll come across a game that makes me immediately regret selling the console. But never fear. Emulation is here. An emulator, more or less, is a piece of software or hardware designed to mimic another computer system. Now you might be thinking that this right here is not a computer system, and that it's not even a computer to begin with. Technically, anything with a microchip or a processor is a computer, just not the kind of computer you're thinking of. The main reason to use an emulator is essentially to run software that's not typically compatible on your device. I'm not really going to go into intricacies of each emulator because, quite frankly, the end goal is the same. Run software that's not compatible on your device. Now that that's out of the way, you might be thinking, isn't emulation illegal? Why are you stealing from these companies? Well, let me be the first to say that emulation is in fact not illegal. There's simply no precedent for emulation being illegal, in the US at least. Obviously, different countries have different laws, but I'm not familiar with any country that's actively banned emulation, because a bunch of major companies use emulation. Even strictly anti-emulation developers like Nintendo use emulation for their virtual consoles and all of that other retro stuff that they do. It's all emulation. The illegal part comes from when you download a ROM off the internet, especially for a game that you don't own. That right there is textbook piracy. But what about downloading ROMs for games that you do own?
That's the neat thing. You don't.
What about making backups of your games? Whether you're like burning a CD or you're dumping the game's cartridges into a ROM file, are those considered illegal? It's a great question, and honestly, it's not one that I'm inclined to answer, nor am I qualified to answer, so I'm going to redirect you to this video by Hoeg Law. This video covers just about everything you'd want to know about emulation. Emulators themselves, running these emulators on competitors' hardware, as well as the act of downloading ROMs and dumping ROMs yourself. Links in the description below. You know, all of this aside, I never really answered the main question of this video. Why is emulation so important? Well, it's for the preservation of video games. The unfortunate truth is that some games will just never ever see a re-release on modern systems, or PC for that matter. In the case of digital titles, once the storefront goes down, you can never ever buy or download these games ever again. And very recently, there was actually a bug that made games unplayable on your PlayStation 3 and PS Vita. As of currently, there is no fix for this, and it's unknown whether or not Sony cares enough to fix this or not. Another reason to emulate is to enhance the original games. Many modern emulators are capable of rendering the games at higher resolutions than was originally available on the systems. Y'all want to play some 4K GameCube games? With the Dolphin emulator, that's more than possible. In fact, it might be quite easy if you have the right hardware. What about running widescreen Super Mario World? I'd probably play that game again just to experience it in widescreen. Now here's an interesting conundrum. What about modern emulators for modern systems that are currently being sold today, meant to emulate games that are currently being released and sold today? These sort of emulators are rarities, and it's rare that these emulators crop up in a timely fashion. It's even rarer if an emulator can actually play games as well as the current hardware that's out. But you know what? The mad lads at Yuzu managed to figure out how to do that. They made an emulator for a currently released system that runs currently released games really well out of the box. Are those emulators illegal? No, of course they're not illegal. Yeah, to be able to play games on Yuzu, you will need to dump your own title keys from your own system, and downloading and sharing those is, I would argue, almost as illegal as downloading and sharing ROMs on the internet. But many people have concerns about running these modern emulators for these modern systems. The first of which is the obvious, the piracy argument. The truth is that piracy is bound to happen, regardless of emulation or not, so it's not fair to blame emulators for, piracy. Many emulation circles will just outright ban you for asking for links to ROMs, or for providing links to ROMs, or even alluding to where to find the ROMs. So yeah, it's fair to say that they don't like piracy either. The second is that it somehow devalues the value of the actual hardware itself. In this case, the Nintendo Switch. And yes, you can run a Nintendo Switch emulator on your Steam Deck or PC and it'll run pretty well, all things considered. But just because it runs well doesn't mean it'll somehow take away from the Nintendo Switch experience. And I don't understand why that even matters either. Nintendo's already sold over 100 million Nintendo Switches. You really think this emulator is gonna kill the Nintendo Switch somehow?